Rizal in Germany. A glimpse of the life and work of Philippine national hero Dr. Rizal in Germany from February 1886 to August 1887. Our national hero Rizal lived and worked in Germany from 1886 to August 1887. Returning after a tour of Europe to the Philippines, he lived for 3 years in Spain, later in France. Rizal went to Paris and Germany in order to specialize in ophthalmologist. Rizal chose this branch of medicine because he wanted to cure his mother's eyes ailment. Rizal became a member of Anthropological Society, the Ethnological Society, and the Geographical Society of Berlin, upon the recommendation of Dr. Jagor and Dr. Meyer.
Rizal left Paris on February 1, 1886, after acquiring enough experience in the clinic of Dr. Werker. He was set to go to Germany. He visited Starburg and other German towns. On February 3, 1886, he arrived at Heidelberg, a historic city in Germany famous for its own old university and romantic surroundings. He lived in a boarding house with some German law students. The German students found out that Rizal was a good chess player and made him a member of the Chess Players Club. He worked at the University Eye Hospital under the direction of Dr. Otto Berker, distinguished German ophthalmologist, and attended the lecture of Dr. Berker and Professor Wilhelm Kuhne at the university. April 22, 1886, Rizal wrote a fine poem, A las Flores de Heidelberg, to the flowers of Heidelberg. In the spring of 1886, Rizal was fascinated by the blooming flowers along the cool banks of the Neckar River. Among them was his favorite flower, the light blue, forget-me-not. Karl Ulmer, a Protestant pastor who was a friend of Jose and let Jose stay in his home. Ulmer became acquainted with Rizal through Ferdinand Blumentritt, a professor and Rizal's close friend who was also lived in Wilhelmsfield. Ulmer welcomed Rizal into his home and allowed him to stay there during his visit to the town. It is said that Rizal was impressed by Ulmer's progressive ideas and his advocacy for religious tolerance. Ulmer's influence on Rizal's thinking and beliefs is not well documented, but it is believed that their conversation and discussion may have contributed to Rizal's growing interest in Protestantism and his questioning of the Catholic Church. Rizal wrote several letters to Ulmer expressing his gratitude for his hospitality and discussing various intellectual and philosophical topics. On July 31, 1886, Jose wrote his first German letter to Professor Blumentritt, who was the director of Ateneo of Litmeritz in Austria. In the letter, Rizal expressed his admiration for Blumentritt's work on the Philippines and his desire to learn more about German language and culture. This letter marked the beginning of a lifelong friendship between Rizal and Blumentritt, and their correspondence became an important source of information about the Philippines for scholars and researchers in Europe.
Leipzig and Dresden. On August 9, 1886, Rizal left Heidelberg and arrived in Leipzig in August 16, 1886. Leipzig was one of the German cities that Rizal visited during his time in Europe, as he sought to further his education, expand his knowledge of different cultures, and work on his writing and advocacy for social and political reform in the Philippines. He became friends with Friedrich Rizal and Hans Meyer, who were historians. During his stay in Germany, he attended some lectures in the University of Leipzig and befriended Professor Friedrich Rizal, a famous German historian, and Dr. Hans Meyer, German anthropologist. He also translated several German and Swiss literary works into Tagalog and sent them to the Philippines. Some of the work he translated include Friedrich Schiller's Wilhelm Tell, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust, and Eugenio Maria de Hostos' La Independencia de Puerto Rico, The Independence of Puerto Rico. Rizal believed that the translation of European literature into native language was an important way to promote national consciousness and cultural pride. His translations helped to introduce European literature and ideas to the Philippines and had a significant impact on the Philippine literature and culture. He even translated fairy tales and Tagalog for the nephew of the historians. He was known to be fluent in multiple languages, including Tagalog, Spanish, German, and English, among others. During his time in Germany, he often used his language skills to help others, including translating fairy tales from German to Tagalog for the nephew of his friends Friedrich Ratzel and Hans Meyer. Rizal's translation work was just one example of his many contributions to the intellectual and cultural exchange between the Philippines and Europe during the late 19th century. Knowing his translation skills, he worked as a proofreader in a publishing firm in Germany. And since Rizal's language skills and attention to detail made him well suited for work as a proofreader, and he did in fact work for a publishing firm in Germany as a proofreader during his time there. Especially Rizal worked for the publishing firm of W. Spaceman in Stuttgart, where he was responsible for reviewing and correcting manuscripts before they went to press. This work not only allowed Rizal to further hone his language skills, but also provided him with valuable experience in the publishing industry. Leipzig, Rizal translated Schiller's William Tell from German into Tagalog so that Filipino might know that the story of the champion of Swiss independence. Rizal found out that the cost of living in Leipzig was cheapest in Europe, so that he stayed 2 months and a half. Because of his knowledge of German, Spanish, and other European language, Rizal worked as a proofreader in a publisher's firm. On October 29, 1886, Rizal left Leipzig for Dresden, where he met Dr. Adolf B. Meyer, director of the Anthropological and Ethnological Museum. Rizal heard Mass in Catholic Church. Evidently, this Mass impressed him very much, for he wrote on his diary, "Truly I have never in my life heard a Mass whose music had greater sublimity and intonation."
Rizal in Berlin. After 6 months in Heidelberg, Jose Rizal traveled by train to Berlin through Leipzig and Dresden, arriving in the city on the evening of November 1, 1886. He stayed at the Central Hotel at the day of his arrival, but later on he transferred to a boarding house at Jagerstrasse. Rizal lived in Berlin, the famous capital of unified Germany, for 5 reasons. First is to gain further knowledge of ophthalmology, to further his studies of sciences and languages, to observe the economic and political conditions of the German nation, to associate with famous German scientists and scholars, and lastly, to publish his novel, Noli Me Tangere. He also had the opportunity to meet Dr. Fyodor Jagor, a German scientist and explorer who had written extensive about the Philippines. Rizal admired Jagor's work, particularly his book Travels in the Philippines, which provided a detailed account of the geography and culture of the Philippines. Rizal and Jagor met in Berlin in 1887, and Rizal was able to show Jagor around the city and introduce him to some of his German friends. The two men corresponded regularly after their meeting, and Jagor continued to provide Rizal with valuable insights and information about the Philippines. Upon the recommendation of Dr. Jagor, Rizal was offered membership in the Anthropological Society, the Ethnological Society, and the Geographical Society of Berlin on condition that he present an original research work on any subject. And in perfect German, he wrote a treatise or Tagalog verse of Taglish Berkunst, Tagalog metrical art. This received great praise from all the members, particularly the president. Rizal's membership in these organizations reflected his keen interest in anthropology, ethnology, and geography, as well as his commitment to advancing knowledge and understanding in these fields. Unter den Linden was a famous street in Berlin where Rizal likes to hang out. It is a historic boulevard in the heart of Berlin, and it was a popular spot for intellectuals, scholars, and artists during Rizal's time in the city. Rizal often visited the cafes and cultural events along Unter den Linden, and he was known to have enjoyed the street's vibrant and lively atmosphere. Now, every schoolchild knows about Rizal and the women of Malolos or Maria Clara, and how he held them up as a model for Filipino womanhood. But did you know that he also advised his own sisters to be like German women? In a letter to his younger sister Trining or Trinidad on March 11, 1886, he wrote about his observations of German women, stating that they were diligent, serious, educated, friendly, and not prone to gossip or quarrels. He also commented on their physical appearance, noting that they were generally tall and fair-skinned. Rizal was known to be an observant and interested in the people and cultures of the countries he visited, and his writings often reflect his insights and reflections on the social and cultural differences he observed.
The creation of Noli Me Tangere. In winter of 1886, Rizal was flat broke and he had to pawn the diamond rings her sister gave to him. The winter of 1886 was memorable for two reasons. Number one, the pain and hunger of sickness he experienced, and the creation of Noli Me Tangere. During the winter of 1886, Jose Rizal faced financial difficulties and had to pawn a diamond ring given to him by his sister Saturnina. Rizal was living in Berlin at that time, pursuing his studies in ophthalmology and working as a freelance translator and proofreader for publishing his firm. However, his earnings were not enough to support his basic needs, so he had to pawn his sister's ring to buy food and medicine.
Rizal's Grand Tour of Europe with Viola. After Rizal's visit to Berlin with Viola, they traveled to several other cities in Germany, including Lake Meritz, Vienna, and Linz. Rizal was particularly impressed by Vienna, where he observed the city's architecture and cultural attractions. And after leaving Austria, Rizal and Viola traveled down the Danube River to Linz, where they continued their journey to Switzerland. They stopped in Geneva, where Rizal attended lectures at the University of Geneva. And after his grand tour to Europe, Rizal returned to the Philippines, where he continued to advocate for reforms and independence from Spanish colonial rule, and he had already written to his father, Francisco Mercado, informing him to his return.